Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of City Beat. And this week I'm joined by Brian Hines from Salem Can Do Better. You're the spokesperson.
Spokesperson, not spokesman, spokesperson. That's
yes.
right.
And maybe you could explain what Salem can do better.
Well, Salem can do better on a lot of things. So I came up with a name for the website because there would be so much use for it in the future. But the first use for it was to say back in last fall that Salem can do better than the $82 million police facility bond measure. And so we opposed that, and it failed. And we wanted very much to support a second try bond measure, but unfortunately that hasn't come to be, so we're opposing the second try $62 million or $61.8 million bond measure. Reluctantly, did our best to come to an agreement with the city, but it didn't happen. So once again, we're on the no side of a police facility bond, which is unfortunate because it would have been good in these days of kind of troubled, as I like to say, Trumpian times, if people politically can come together at the local level. But we did our best, and that didn't occur. And we can talk about what our differences are with the city.
Well, I think that would be a good place to start. Because you were I think most people recognize the fact that a new police facility needs to be built. The one that is currently in use is too small and is in the basement of a building that's not earthquake safe.
Right.
So that's not the discussion, really. That's not what the sticking point is. You're not.
Well, not among the vast majority, 95, 99% of people that I come in contact with. Some people just don't like to spend government money on anything.
Well, that's true.
So but all the people that are informed and they're involved in the issue, you're absolutely right. Everybody agrees there's a need for a police facility. So what the city did after the first try measure passed, it was way too expensive, way too large, 148,000 square feet, $82 million. So they reduced the size to 115,000 square feet and $62 million. So those are good things. However, the cost per square foot remained pretty much exactly the same, very high, the most expensive police facility ever built in Oregon to my knowledge, for certainly the most expensive one built in recent years. And for me, the most important thing was that just lots of people, and I know this, even though Mayor Bennett disagrees with me about this, voted no because they didn't like the idea that City Hall and the library were going to be left unprotected in the big one earthquake collapse. And that's the reason for moving the police out of City Hall, because it's going to collapse when the big one earthquake hits. But they're going to move new city employees into the same space. So we argued that why not do everything, at least seismically retrofit the library, which is an easier building to retrofit than City Hall, and approach in May the citizens with a bond measure, a public safety bond measure that does two things: builds a reasonably priced police facility and seismically retrofits the library and makes some other renovations to it. And that, in fact, was what most people asked the city council to do, at least that I heard. Even the group that John Hawkins, who is now chairing the Yes campaign, came to the city council and said, we've reached agreement on this. We think this is something everybody can get behind, 115,000 square foot police facility and seismically retrofit the library. But then things fell apart, as happens in politics and City Hall goings on, and they ended up with only a police facility. So that's the main reason I personally am opposing it, because I just don't like the idea of saving the lives of police and not saving the lives of other people who use the library and also City Hall. Even though I must say they did put the library, or promised to put a library bond on the November ballot. But there were comments I heard at city council meetings that we can always change our mind, which they can. And there were also comments that along the lines of, this was bothersome. Well, it's just only going to be for $15 million, and there's going to be a big schools bond, could be $100 million, $150 million, maybe more on the November ballot. It could look cheap in comparison to the schools bond. So, the idea of pitting children that could be crushed to death at the library versus children that could be overcrowded or crushed to death in school buildings just doesn't appeal to me. They should have put it on the May ballot, where the city and all of the citizens could have come together around the issue of protecting the library, building a new police facility that's also earthquake safe. But in their wisdom or lack of wisdom, the city council decided to do otherwise.
Well, they seem to be of the opinion that you can only have one thing on the ballot, as if people can't count and add up, because they know that the library and City Hall, once the police leave, are still going to need to be retrofitted. And some other work is also going to be needed as well. And so they're going to be asking for that money for the library in November and City Hall in like a 3 to 5 year period.
Right.
So we know those things are coming down. And, you know, for some of us who kind of pay attention, we know it's coming. So why not have it all in the same bond measure?
Yeah, plug. If you go to salemcandobetter.com, you will find that I put together a video because I sat through the work sessions and the city council meetings dealing with this issue, and I put together a short video of clips of, again, John Hawkins, who favored the police, who's leading the Police Facility Yes campaign, other people, Suzanne Kaltwasser of Salem Community Vision, me, several citizens, all saying, let's do both of these things. You know, we can do both. Like the city often has streets and bridges bonds. There's streets that cars go on the road, and then there's bridges, things that go over a river. Two different things. People can understand these both have to do with transportation. I think people can understand that protecting people at the library and making the police department more efficient and also protecting the lives of the people there go together under the rubric of public safety. And in fact, until about 2015, this was the plan of the city of Salem. Under Mayor Pearson and Chief Jerry Moore, they were going around trying to push a 75,000 square foot police facility plan just north of City Hall by Mirror Pond. And then they were going to also seismically retrofit City Hall at the same time, and that was the plan. And there's plenty of slides from the consultants that were telling the city council that if we build a new police facility, City Hall is still dangerous. It's still going to collapse in an earthquake, and so we've saved the lives of the police department staff, but we've left endangered the lives of the people that will both be moving into the space the police department vacated and all the people that are still working there, plus the visitors. Anybody that goes and sits at a city council meeting is kind of suspended up in air, and if you, as I like to tell them, if you feel the earth shaking, you know, say your prayers or say your best wishes because you're about to collapse. And that's not good.
And it's concrete.
It's concrete, and
yeah.
it's you know, kind of suspended on pillars. And so the idea was that they were going to build new city council chambers and do all kinds of other things. So similarly, you know, I have shown, on an addition to our Salem Can Do Better website, made a whole new page today showing this was easy to do. I told them and others at city council meetings, you just reduce the price of the excess cost of the police facility, say $9 million, you can afford the seismic part of the library improvements. For $15 million, they can have a new roof, they can be earthquake safe. And what is $15 million? $15 million turns out to be exactly the amount of money you'd save if you built the police facility for the same price per square foot as Beaverton has recently approved their police facility. Our police facility is 26% more per square foot, leaving aside the land costs, than Beaverton. 26% of the cost of our police facility minus the land acquisition is $15 million. So we could have both if they had a cost-effective, reasonably priced police facility. For just $700,000 more, you could have library, seismic retrofitting, a new roof, and a new police facility. And that could be what comes to be if this second police facility bond is rejected again by voters.
Well, there's actually I had Mayor Bennett in for a conversation on this same topic, and he was telling me that there won't be another bond measure concerning the police facility because they need to go on to other things. But that aside, one of the things I brought up to the mayor was that these May elections are very small turnouts, 20 to 25% over the last 3 May elections.
Okay.
Off-year elections.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I believe that.
Okay. And generally, those tend to be more conservative voters, probably a lot of those people that don't want to vote for any expenditure of funds. So, my view was that having the library included would bring in a lot of voters who really like having a quality library here in town and would want to support getting that bond measure. And if it was coupled with the police facility, I felt that that would work better for them, but they're convinced that that won't work.
Well, for the reason that you said, I agree with your perception. And on the video that I made, there are people that are saying that just emotionally, now children are not, at story time, are not going to be crushed to death. I said that a lot in the last campaign, or the No campaign, and it resonated. I know it did, because on social media, Facebook, you get instant feedback from likes, from shares, from comments, and people do not like that idea. But you're right, Mayor Bennett. You'll see on the video where Kara Kaiser, a city councilor, Tom Anderson, a city councilor, are speaking about having heard from dozens and dozens of people that they want the library seismic to be included with the police facility. And they're convinced of this from talking to people. And then you'll see a little short clip of Mayor Bennett that goes, well, basically he said, thank you for your political opinion. I'm the mayor of the entire town. That isn't how I see it. So there was a strange series of votes on the city council where at first there was a plan to have both the police facility and the library part of the bond measure. Then there wasn't. Then people, mainly me, probably, complained and emailed and said, this is not a good idea. Then there was a kind of a lengthy discussion at a city council meeting. There was a 4-4 vote where the 4 progressives voted to consider a library bond with the police facility bond. The 4 conservatives said no. It didn't pass because there was only 8.
Tie.
It was a tie because the Ward 6 seat was vacant. And Mayor, I've talked with the mayor, briefly about this. I've heard him say his theory about why the first try bond measure failed, and he has said, I don't know whether he still holds this view, there was an influx of Trump voters who what? This is what I don't understand, because for one thing, they're conservative, they don't like money, but you would think that also they might like the police more than other people. But regardless, when I looked at the Marion County turnout, I saw no evidence that there was a greater Republican turnout than there was in the last presidential election, 2012. So I just don't see that. Plus, Salem went 11% for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. So it was liberals that were voting more than anything. And that was in the general election. And liberals are kind of, perhaps in this case, it would only failed by a few percent. So they only need, this is one of Tom Anderson's points, you only need to shift a few percentage points. There's way more than a few percent of people that love the library in Salem, and adding them in as a vociferous, excited, yes, let's make the library earthquake safe, I think would have helped, like you say. And now those same people would come out in November, but then they'd be arguing not exactly against a school bond, but people would be looking at this massive school bond, also $15 million for the library. Can we do both? And then we know that there's a streets and bridges bond coming down. There's just a string of bonds coming down the pike. And what I worry about, given our, let's say, precarious political situation in this country, is that at any time there could be an economic or foreign policy or any sort of, Korean disaster that would, make people very wary about voting for anything. So that's why I wish we'd be voting on the library in May and not in November, which is why I'm urging a no vote now on the police facility bond.
Well, it's a difficult subject.
It is.
And it kind of divides the community somewhat.
Oh, definitely.
And, like you were saying, it seems like it's more a time for people to kind of come together. But I think you're right in the sense that I think what I've seen is more liberals are coming out and voting, like in these special elections where Trump has named somebody to his cabinet that was in the House, say, and now there's votes going on that were in very solid Republican districts. In one case, where Trump won by, I don't know, it was like 50, 60%. When they had this House vote, the Democrat only lost by 7%. So there's been kind of a swing in people's perception of what to do about the Trump administration. And I believe it was in Georgia now where a Democrat,
Yes.
won Newt Gingrich's old seat. He didn't get quite enough to prevent a runoff, but he got 48%. And that was kind of unheard of in that district for a Democrat to pull down that many votes.
Right.
So I think we have the possibility of having liberals come out more in force for this May election. I'll be kind of curious to see what the turnout numbers are because, like I said, it's been 20 to 25% over the last 3 elections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the school board elections seem to, at least among the people that care about politics, are attracting a lot of interest. I don't know. I've tried to think whether there's any lessons, national lessons for our May election. I don't know.
We're going to find out.
When I talk about this, I usually just say that it's just hard to say. What I do know is just that people are kind of on edge. They're anxious. My wife was a leader of the Women's March that happened in January, and that just had a huge turnout of people that were just upset. In the Science March last weekend, I was there, and similarly, although more low key. So I'm not sure. I think we will be able to analyze the results of the police facility bond election afterwards, and we won't know exactly what the mood of the electorate is. I've been communicating the fact that people just are kind of mistrusting. I mean, Trump was elected by mistrust of government. They wanted change.
Right.
And what we're seeing here, what bothers me is kind of like the old, I can't remember whether it's sausage or hot dogs, being a vegetarian, I can't recall which you like less if you know how they're made. Okay, sausage. I mean, if you just see it all wrapped up in the meat counter, that's one thing. If you see all the stuff that goes into it, and when you sit through city council meetings and committees and work sessions, as I do, you see the sausage of a police facility bond being made, and believe me, it isn't really pretty. It's pretty ugly, and it bothers me, and that's one of the reasons. It's not the reason most people are going to vote for or against it, but to me, to vote for this is encouraging a flawed process where, for example, on November 12th, a week after the bond failed, I and the others in Salem Community Vision and me representing Salem Can Do Better wrote Mayor Bennett, to the police chief, to the city council, saying we want to work with you. We who helped to defeat it want to now help to pass a bond. And I got an email back from Mayor Bennett that said, things are busy, no time right now, a couple of months we'll be getting to this. I'll get back to you, Brian. Wait. It's now January, nothing's happening. We never were invited to the table. The new plan was made by people, what I call the powers that be. I mean, they had ex-mayor Janet Taylor and Jerry Frank were part of kind of the leaders or the figureheads on a committee that John Hawkins led, and they came up with this 115,000 square foot plan along with city staff. But we that opposed it were only invited to be there at the very end, and so we weren't part of the discussions. And so to me it was just a bad political decision, because if you don't want opposition a second time, you should get the people that opposed it at the table the first time and try to reach a consensus. I mean, that's what they're trying to do in Congress right now. And yet this city is still, like you were saying, just in this divided thing where there's kind of like the Chamber of Commerce, which has raised through their Keep Salem Safe and Friends of Salem Police PAC $111,000 to support the bond measure. We at Salem Can Do Better have $2,200, so that's a 50-to-1 difference. So the money and the power is on the yes side. Whoever we are, just ordinary people, are saying no. And we've seen this before in Salem, and it bothers me. I met with people, in the fall and in the early of the year, said, I don't want this to happen. I'm so upset with what's happening nationally, and I just wake up in the morning with my head ready to explode from Trump. I don't want my head exploding from local things. Let's work together. And we tried, but it just didn't happen. And that's just a commentary on how things in Salem need to change, along with the entire country.
Well, one of the things too, and you kind of bring this up, is the fact that if you bring people into the planning process, then it's part of them. They've helped shape this, and they feel like they're invested in it. And I used to see this in business all the time, you know, that people would make decisions without talking to the people who actually did the work, and then would wonder why people resisted these changes. I said, you didn't talk to them first, you know, to explain what you were doing, to get their input into the process that they're now going to have to do.
Exactly.
And, and like, once you talk to those folks and that you come to some sort of agreement, they're okay with it. And you get better results that way because people are cooperating with you.
Right. What would have made sense, and I don't know why this didn't happen, I kind of pictured that after November, after it fails, the city would immediately start a process, a public outreach effort, you know, to get people to come together as they do, say, with, you know, other planning efforts, like with Middle Brown. You have meetings. Before you reach a final plan, you talk to the people that are concerned about the issue and what kind of police facility, what should be like, what sort of police department do we want with community policing? How friendly, how open should the police facility be? Should it be like a fortress, you know, or it should be more welcoming? Should there be basketball courts and, you know, a donut shop, if you want to be cliched, or basketball courts or whatever? Instead, you know, what happened was, once again, a plan is developed behind closed doors. It comes to the city council. Then the idea of the city is to have public outreach, meaning here's our plan. I'm reaching out and hoping you take it, as opposed to, here's a blank slate. Let's all write on it together and reach out for ideas. And that would have made selling the plan a lot better. Now they're selling a plan that people had essentially no communication and no participation in developing. So that, you know, that may work or it may not. I just don't know if in these days of social, you know, media, that it's enough to put up some lawn signs and all this and just say, vote yes. It may be. We'll see in May.
Well, they're doing telephone polling.
Yes.
They're also doing town hall meetings.
Oh, yes.
Where you call in. I don't know how much
okay.
participation you're going to get in one of those.
But of course, nothing can change. I mean, the plan
is the plan.
The plan is the plan. And there was this idea that the people didn't care about, you know, earthquake proofing the library and City Hall when they voted no. And, you know, I know for a fact, just because I just know that wasn't the case. And so we'll see how important that is. That is one of the, you know, the four reasons that I'm giving to vote no. The earthquake preparedness, the cost still too high, the lack of public involvement we've just talked about was a third, and the Salem having many other needs is a fourth, you know, because if you go in your own life, a couple $1 million is a lot of money. When you're at city council meetings, a couple $1 million isn't a lot of money because it's not their money.
Well, you also brought up another point about urban renewal.
Yes. On
the location that they are hoping to use for this new police facility in this bond.
Yes.
The old automobile.
The
O'Brien site.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be part of some development of mixed use, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yes, the North Downtown Urban Renewal Plan says that was, you know, earmarked for retail, residential. I mean, because it's only a block from downtown, or it is part of downtown, really. And so just flowing in there with, you know, shops, restaurants, you know, condos, affordable housing, that was the plan. And then because the city and the police chief really wanted a centrally located new police facility, that site just popped up as a high priority, even though there were other sites, you know, several miles further away, say on Portland Road, or I've had people suggest to me the city shops area, even though it's in a floodplain, you could elevate the building. I don't know what that would cost, but it's certainly possible because there's plenty of buildings in that area, south of Mission, you know.
You also have the North Campus area.
The North Campus area. There's lots of possibilities. So it bothers, you know, some people, I would say the more businesslike and conservative people I've talked with, that we're taking productive downtown land and turning it over to a government tax exempt, you know, non-property tax paying activity that nobody comes to town and saying, wow, let's go look at the police facility. Most people want to stay as far away as they can from a police facility. So to take 3.5 acres of prime downtown property and plop a police facility there, at first that didn't bother me, but the more I think about it and the more I hear from people that are concerned about this, if it fails, there could be an opportunity to rethink the necessity of having it in the downtown area when, as the police chief says, every police car is essentially a traveling precinct. And I haven't heard a really good reason why it needs to be downtown.
Well, I think when I went to some of those Blue Ribbon Commission meetings, they were talking about it needed to be close to City Hall. And I went on my own and picked out a bunch of cities here in Oregon and throughout the country to find out what the average distance was between City Hall and the police station,
Mm-hmm.
in places where it was similar population. And I found out that it was quite a bit different. It was about almost 3/4 of a mile was the average.
Okay.
There were some that were as far away as about 4 or 5 miles.
Oh, sure.
And there were some that were located right next to City Hall, but those were usually older buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you have happen when you have a central city that's still viable is there's not a whole lot of land available for development for a police facility. And so that's, I think, one of the problems that you're pointing out is that they kind of limited where they wanted it to be
Right.
in an area. Even the 3.5 acres is rather small because now they have to have
A parking structure.
a parking structure. And,
Well, they think they do. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a couple $1 million, or that's an expensive part of the property, and that should perhaps be rethought. They could have surface parking. It's just, you're right. I haven't never understood. You heard, well, we need to be close so we can go down and have meetings with city officials. Well, there's something called Skype and the telephone, and cell phones still exist. So yeah, I never heard a good argument. And also, it's not like the police are sitting there with their feet up on the table waiting to be called out. They're out there patrolling. So it's not like if there's an emergency, they're all going to have to be in the central area, so they go every which way. I can see that some of perhaps the special equipment needs to be accessible, but so there's a lot of questions, and either we won't be answering them because this bond measure passes, or they'll be revisited if this bond measure fails, which could be a plan C, and that's fine. There's plenty of time. Instances of things have failed many times, and eventually a good plan comes out of several failures.
Well, I think that's the direction we're headed in. And I guess we'll be seeing what happens during this election.
Sure. I've got no idea, I like to say. I mean, anybody that knows what the voters are going to do doesn't really know. So we'll see.
Okay.
Thanks, Ken.
Well, thank you for coming in tonight, Brian. And this has been City Beat, and join us next time.